Imagine a period when a vast region lived under the shadow of a single, powerful state, with their futures heavily dictated by its policies. What happens when that dominant power begins to change its own fundamental principles? Mikhail Gorbachev's reforms significantly influenced Eastern Europe by fundamentally altering the Soviet Union's approach to its satellite states, effectively granting them the space and freedom to pursue their own paths away from communist rule. The core of this influence stemmed from two key policies: Glasnost, meaning openness, and Perestroika, or economic restructuring. Glasnost encouraged greater transparency and public debate within the Soviet Union, which inevitably spilled over into calls for similar freedoms in Eastern Europe. Simultaneously, Perestroika aimed to revitalize the struggling Soviet economy, prompting Gorbachev to conclude that the financially burdensome and politically destabilizing maintenance of control over Eastern European nations was no longer sustainable or desirable. This shift manifested as a direct abandonment of the Brezhnev Doctrine, which had previously asserted the Soviet Union's right to intervene in the affairs of socialist countries to preserve communist rule. Without the credible threat of Soviet military intervention, popular movements and opposition groups across Eastern Europe felt empowered to demand democratic reforms and greater sovereignty. This courage spread rapidly, with citizens peacefully protesting and ultimately overthrowing their long-standing communist governments. This new approach became informally known as the Sinatra Doctrine, where countries were allowed to do it their way, rather than following Moscow's lead. This pivotal policy change unleashed a wave of self-determination, enabling nations like Poland, Hungary, East Germany, and Czechoslovakia to transition away from Soviet-style communism and move towards independence and democratic governance. Ultimately, Gorbachev's willingness to reform at home and permit self-determination abroad created an irreversible cascade of events. His changes not only led to the dismantling of the Iron Curtain and the reunification of Germany, but also empowered millions in Eastern Europe to reclaim their national identities and decide their own destinies, fundamentally reshaping the political map of the world.
If you're into this, like, subscribe, and drop a comment.